One day before a family trip, my daughter-in-law told me there was no place for me. So the suitcase was already packed. That's the part that stayed with me, the small, humiliating detail of the suitcase already sitting by my bedroom door, fat and ready, a tan rollaway I'd owned for 20 years with a strip of red ribbon tied to the handle so I could spot it on a luggage carousel. I'd packed it 3 days early because I was excited. At 67 years old, I was excited like a child, which is probably why what happened next hurt the way it did. My name is Bryan Calloway. I'm a retired high school history teacher from Dayton, Ohio. I have one son, Marcus, who is 38 and works in software out in Portland. I have 2 grandchildren, Lily, who is 6, and Oliver, who is 4. And I have a daughter-in-law named Cassandra, who, up until the evening of October 14th, I had simply considered difficult. That evening, she reclassified herself entirely. It had been Marcus's idea, originally. A week in a rented cabin outside Asheville, North Carolina. He'd called me in August, voice full of the warm enthusiasm he inherited from his mother, God rest her soul, and said, "Dad, I want us to do a real trip. The whole family. You, me, Cass, the kids. Like we used to when I was little." I didn't point out that like we used to involved a different wife and a different life and a different version of everything, because Marcus meant well. He always means well. That is both his greatest quality and his most exhausting one. I said yes immediately. I bought new hiking boots. I researched trails around Asheville that were appropriate for a 4-year-old stamina. I ordered a children's book about the Blue Ridge Mountains to read to Lily and Oliver the week before we left. I circled October 15th on my kitchen calendar with a red marker. Cassandra had been quiet about the trip. Not opposed, as far as I could tell. Just quiet, which was her default setting around me. We'd never had a blow-up, Cassandra and I. Nothing dramatic. Just a persistent, mutual coolness that had calcified over the years into something I couldn't quite name. I tried. I brought wine when I visited. I remembered her birthday. I asked about her work, she's in marketing. And listened carefully to the answers. Whatever wall existed between us, I couldn't find the door. I told myself it would get better. People say that. It's something people say. October 14th. One day before we were supposed to leave. My phone buzzed at 6:47 in the evening. I was making pasta, the simple kind my wife used to make, the kind with garlic and olive oil and a little red pepper. I looked at the screen and saw it was a call from Marcus's phone, but when I answered, it was Cassandra's voice. Bryan. She didn't say hello. She never said hello to me. Cassandra. Hi. What's going on? A pause. Not a hesitant pause, a strategic one. I'd spent 30 years listening to teenagers construct pauses before they explained why their homework wasn't done. I recognized the architecture of this silence. I need to talk to you about tomorrow, she said. Something tightened in my chest. Okay. The cabin is smaller than we thought. When Marcus described it, I pictured something different, but I looked at the listing again today and the sleeping situation it's really just the master, one room for the kids, and a pull-out sofa in the main area. It's not comfortable for 4 adults. 4 adults? I said, slowly. Who's the 4th adult? My sister is coming. I set down my wooden spoon. I did it very carefully, the way you set something down when your hands have started to shake and you don't want anyone to know. Your sister, I repeated. She's been going through a hard time. The divorce. You've heard about the divorce. I had heard about the divorce in the same distant, second-hand way I heard about most things related to Cassandra's family, through Marcus, in brief, edited summaries. I have, I said. She needs this trip, Bryan. She really needs it. And with her there, the space just doesn't work with you also being there. I'm sorry. I know it's late notice. She didn't sound sorry. She sounded like someone who had rehearsed not sounding sorry. Marcus and I talked about it and we both think Put Marcus on the phone, I said. Another pause. Longer this time. He's bathing Oliver. I'll wait. She didn't put Marcus on the phone. She said, he agrees with me, Bryan. Please don't make this harder than it needs to be. You can come visit another time. We'll plan something smaller, just you and the kids maybe. The consolation prize. Dangled like I was Oliver's age. The important thing is that the kids have a good trip. I said something then that I am still proud of, which is that I said, almost nothing. I said, I understand. Have a good trip, Cassandra. And I hung up. I stood in my kitchen for a long time after that. The pasta water was boiling. I turned it off. I wasn't hungry anymore. The suitcase was by the door. The red ribbon on the handle. I'm not going to pretend I wasn't devastated, because I was. I'm 67 and I live alone, and that cabin in Asheville had represented something I'd been holding in my chest for months, the particular warmth of being included, of being wanted, of being someone's family. My wife died 4 years ago. Marcus is my only child. Lily and Oliver are the best thing that has happened to me in a very long time. The idea of a week reading them stories about mountains and taking them to see waterfalls, that was the kind of thing I'd let myself look forward to. The kind of thing that makes February worth surviving. I sat down at my kitchen table. I looked at my phone. Marcus didn't call. That was its own answer. Here's what I did. I didn't call Marcus back and make a scene. I didn't send a long, wounded email. I didn't call my sister in Cleveland and cry, though I thought about it. I sat at my kitchen table, and I made a decision, and then I stood up and I started making different plans. The cabin was in Asheville. I had already researched Asheville for 3 months. I knew which restaurants had the best mountain trout. I knew which bookstores stayed open late. I knew the name of a small jazz bar that had live music on Friday nights, and I knew that the Biltmore estate was extraordinary in October when the trees turned. I was not going to the cabin. But I could still go to Asheville. I booked myself a room at a bed and breakfast near downtown, a place called the Ivy House, with a porch and a garden and a breakfast menu that included something called a Smoky Mountain frittata, which I decided I deserved. I booked it for 5 nights. I rearranged the red ribbon on my suitcase because it was still packed and still ready and I was going to use it. Then I did one more thing. I called my old colleague Pat Hendricks, who had retired 2 years after me and moved, of all places, to Asheville. We'd taught in the same department for 15 years. I hadn't seen her in 4 years, the pandemic, then my wife's illness, then the gray blur of grief that followed. I called her number half expecting it to be disconnected. She answered on the second ring. Bryan Calloway, she said, in the exact tone she used when a student gave a surprisingly good answer. Pleased and a little surprised. Pat, I said. It turns out I'm going to be in Asheville tomorrow. Are you by any chance free this week? I won't tell you that the trip was perfect. I won't tell you that I didn't think about Marcus and the kids, didn't wonder if Lily asked where Grandpa was, didn't feel the ache of it some mornings before the coffee kicked in. I won't tell you that. But I will tell you about Tuesday afternoon, when Pat and I drove up the Blue Ridge Parkway and pulled over at an overlook and stood there in the cold October air looking at a valley full of trees gone red and gold and amber, and Pat said, "This is why I moved here," and I understood her completely. I'll tell you about the frittata, which was exceptional. I'll tell you about the jazz bar on Friday, where a woman played piano with her eyes closed, and I sat at a small table alone and drank a bourbon and felt, for the first time in a long time, that being alone and being lonely are not the same thing. I'll tell you that on Wednesday, my phone rang. It was Marcus. He said he was sorry. He said it in the halting, pained way that told me Cassandra didn't know he was calling, that he'd stepped outside or waited until she was occupied. He said he should have called the night before. He said he should have stood up for me. I said, "Where are you right now?" He said, "Asheville. The cabin. It's beautiful, Dad." I said, "I know. I'm here too." A long silence. You're in Asheville?" I'm at a bed and breakfast off Marymount Avenue. I had the best frittata of my life this morning. He laughed, startled, disbelieving, then genuinely amused. And in that laugh I heard my son at 12 years old, at 8, at 4, the boy I raised and loved and sometimes barely recognized in the man he'd become. We met for lunch, just the two of us, while Cassandra took the kids to a farm attraction nearby. We sat across from each other at a small restaurant and ate sandwiches and talked the way we hadn't talked in years. Not about Cassandra. Not about the trip. About his mother. About things he remembered. About what he wanted for his kids that he hadn't had, and what he'd had that he didn't want to lose. When we stood up to leave, he hugged me on the sidewalk, in the cold autumn air, and held on longer than he needed to. My suitcase is unpacked now. Back in the closet, ribbon still tied to the handle, ready. I'm not sure what happens next with Cassandra. I'm not sure what happens next with any of it. Family is not a problem you solve. It's a condition you manage, with patience and imperfect love and, occasionally, the good sense to book yourself a room at a bed and breakfast and order the frittata. The suitcase was already packed. I'm glad I used it.